Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Zombie Train, episode 222. I've still got a little frog in my throat, although I'm a lot better than when I recorded Under Construction. Speaking of which, if you want to see this footage at normal speed with live commentary, go watch Under Construction episode 11, which should be coming out at the same time as this. The other little housekeeping thing is next week, just next week, we'll be doing a route review on an unknown route so far. I don't know what route I'll be doing, but hopefully it's a good one. And I've got to find something between then and now. If you have a route that you want to be reviewed, come talk to me about it on Bombs321 on Skype, which is the same as my YouTube name, of course. Anyways, so let me go get the full wording of the question for this one, but this is a good one. I might actually be able to stay on this question for the whole time if I don't get distracted. So, Zombie Train 200. That's what it was from, a momentous episode where there wasn't anything actually that momentous contained within the episode. And so, nope. There we go. Okay, so this came as part of a multi-pronged question, and it was Eastrail11 asking, and he goes, "What was your favorite blade, like knife or sword?" All right, so I was not one for blades. I am admittedly kind of a weakling, and I can't swing something, even if it's decently sharp, at a zombie hard enough to really do any damage. I'd rather not be that close to a zombie. I did have a pocket knife, a Swiss Army knife, that could do just about anything, but it was used more for technical things than it was for, combat. And even at that point, if you're that close to a zombie, you might as well be dead anyways. But, unless you're either lucky or you've got friends or you're really well prepared. But the thing about Solanum, the virus, is that it is so deeply contaminated in, it is so deeply ingrained, I guess, or every part of a zombie's body is contaminated with Solanum to an extreme extent. That's the way I'm trying to put it. When it enters the body, it multiplies and multiplies and multiplies and multiplies. In that way, it's sort of like a bacteria, but it's not a bacteria. And it takes over the brain. It basically changes the entire physiology of the body. You stop having, blood circulation. It sort of turns to goo. You stop using your digestive system. You stop having to breathe, although you still keep breathing. Your heart keeps pumping, but it doesn't have anything to pump, and you're just sucking in and blowing out air and not doing anything with that air. Basically, Solanum creates an anaerobic organism. It doesn't need oxygen. A zombie doesn't need oxygen, which is insanity, and it would be really nice. At least after the war, a lot of people put in a lot of thought into capturing zombies and sort of taking them apart and figuring out how they tick, although that became dangerous very quickly. And the reason it became so incredibly dangerous is because even the slightest infection, even the slightest little drop of zombie goo, because I won't really call it liquid, they don't have that much, in the way of fluidic bodily fluids, in your mouth or in a wound is full-blown infection in about 24 hours. And there have been successes with amputations. If you get bit in the arm, if you get really, really quick, get the arm cut off, you might survive. There's also, if you start, eating zombie flesh, you'll just die before you get a chance to, it's poisonous. It's fully poisonous. So, if you will die before you get a chance to be infected. That's a little bit weird, but it does have to make it into your bloodstream. But any sort of open wound, any sores, anything, if you get splashed with zombie goo, you're probably screwed. And that's why people did not go for close combat during World War Z, hardly at all, unless you were A, particularly good, and B, very, very careful about covering yourself everywhere. Now, the best example that I can think of this, or the best example that I know, period, is one of our crew members, and I talked about her a little bit last episode. Her name is Evie. She's a Chicagoan native, and she, well, I'm not sure if she doesn't really just do firearms, or she just avoided them, or I don't know, she just found they were impractical because you have to find ammo or something like that. I never really addressed her on it, and she just became comfortable with blades. So she would have these two blades that were probably about, I don't know, good 6 or 7 inches long, and she would wrap herself, like everything but her eyes almost, she looked like this ninja, in these strips of cloth which were pinned at the sides, and she could like snip it and, pull the pins and, remove portions of it fairly easily. So it wasn't the most cumbersome thing. It was a lot. She explained it to me at one point. I was kind of impressed with the way she'd set it up. It was homemade. But, I figured she missed her calling as a tailor. But when she went into action, she would always keep zombies at arm length as best as possible and always, always, always aim for the neck. And she spent a lot of time sharpening those blades, because you've got to sever the head first. And that's, the zombie will be incapacitated at that point from the neck down, obviously. They don't have anything to do. The head will still be upset. And so it can bite you. And so the bottom of the blade would have this, I don't know, like almost club thing. Almost like the head of a small sledgehammer. It would be cut, smash. Or she'd just hit them with the butt of the blade, where the head thing was. If she could, initially. But it was just this flurry. I have no idea what sort of technique it was, but it was very, very impressive. She was the thing that proved to me that blades could be effective. Now, there were people who used, like, swords and stuff. I believe there was a decent thing about this in World War Z, the book. And they were decently effective. Again, as long as you kept the zombies at arm's length, I could see the merit to, if you're in trouble, just standing and spinning in a circle, but that can only work for so long. A, you'll get tuckered out. B, the sword will hit something a little bit more meaty and probably get knocked out of your hands. Or C, they'll get the drop on you when you're looking away from them, even if you're spinning. How fast can you spit? Let's be honest. So, I never really got acquainted with blades that much. I used blades much more for utility than for combat. And I guess then to answer the question, really, my favorite blade was a knife. We didn't have anybody that used a sword on crew. Again, I heard about them. They were much more prevalent in countries which had more swords. Notably, I believe, like I was saying, in World War Z, there was this Japanese guy who was sort of, I believe he used a sword, if I recall correctly, but maybe that's just my inner, stereotype coming out. It was an old dude and a kid, an old blind guy, who had, he was I believe either a Hiroshima or a Nagasaki survivor. So anyways, there was one group in particular, if I recall correctly, they sort of lived out on the western edge of the Appalachians, and they were, I guess they were sort of a migrant group, because they didn't have a home, they didn't have a calling, like a town you could roll into. But, everybody knew sort of in the general direction they went. I knew that if I ever needed to call upon this special team, I'd be able to. I didn't really see the need for calling on them, because, this was pre-Evie. I frankly thought using blades was completely ridiculous and senseless and would just get you killed in, 30 seconds or less. But these guys apparently made a living off of it, although I hear the turnover was kind of high. But these were sort of these burly guys, as far as I understand, that were very well trained. There was a rumor that they came from like a medieval fair reenactment group thing. I don't know. the joke among the crew was that these were just like, this was the LARPers' best scenario. Like, they knew, they studied the blade, but yeah, they made a name for themselves. I know. I remember coming into a couple of towns and, being impressed that they were still around, and it was like, oh, well, these guys, we called for these guys, and they came in and took care of the problem. But we never contacted them directly. They were the something troop, actually. That sort of lended to the idea that these guys were from a medieval fair. They called themselves the, I can't recall, troop. T-R-U-P-E, maybe. Again, I never saw it spelled out. And I don't know. So I can only assume these guys were using like long swords or broadswords in a sort of medieval weaponry. I would see occasionally in houses that we went through, the brackets for some sort of weapon. Generally you'd think, shotgun hanging on the wall or something, but in the case it's like, brackets for like an axe, or you'd go through a garage or something, and you realize, like the heavy-duty gardening utensils are gone. The tree-felling axes, or like the pickaxe, or something. It's these guys don't have one of these, or we think they had one of them, but somebody came in and took it because they figured they could use it. A pickaxe is a little bit more outlandish because that's a little bit unwieldy. But there are definitely reports of people defending their houses with axes, with shovels, with pickaxes, even with like hoes and stuff like that. Anything that you can use to keep a zombie at arm's length from you is very, very good. Blade notwithstanding. But it just comes down to your ability, your proficiency with that weaponry. And most people just didn't have it. People like me definitely just didn't have the physical prowess to be able to do something like that. It wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to happen. If you put a sword in my hands, I would have just been... I would have been flabbergasted. Like, you think I'm going to be able to save myself with this? It's not going to happen. To the point in my life I never really held a weapon like that. And during the course of the zombie train, again, I got my hands on Evie's blades a couple of times. They were pretty weighty. They were fairly well balanced. The bit at the end offset the weight of the blade. And so you could throw it, and it would tumble really well. She demonstrated this to me several times. But she didn't like to do that because they were custom, and you didn't want to break them, you didn't want to scuff them, and you didn't want to lose them especially. I never saw her throw one of those against a zombie. So, there you go. She was very careful about not losing her blades. But, yeah, no. And the addition was, she was strong enough to be able to wield them with enough power to, I guess, make a difference. Or, to actually do damage. And at the same time, she was small and nimble enough. I mean, she wasn't that short, but she was wiry girl. Not really wiry, I guess. But she was thinnish. And that she was nimble enough that she could do all sorts of gymnastic feats. And, I was perpetually impressed by her. But the point is, she could get out of a tough situation pretty easily. She was able to outrun zombies and run for a really good period of time. I have no doubt that she would beat me in pretty much any physical competition whatsoever. So, it wasn't even necessarily about the blade, it was the person to put that kind of blade to use. I was not the kind of person to be able to make use of a blade. So, I stayed away from them. So, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have more questions like that was actually fairly interesting. It was a fascination for me, not in the romantic sense, but just a holy crap, somebody can actually pull this off sort of sense for probably months after we got her on board. and that was shortly before the Battle of Portland, so she was integral. Anyways, I'll see you next week. Train Man out.